I'd like to welcome Tarika Dhingra. Hello, Tarika. How are you?
Hi, Lindsay. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well indeed. Tarika is a digital security and privacy lead at NatWest. Now, today, we're going to be investigating how to create seamless and secure authentication experiences. And don't forget to submit your questions using the Q&A feed, of course. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the discussion with Tarika. Now, Tarika, when we talk about authentication, look, there can sometimes be a trade-off between a seamless experience and a secure experience. So how do you, as a bank, start to strike the right balance between, seamless and secure?
Thank you, Lindsay. As we all know, there isn't a silver bullet solution when it comes to authentication. It's about understanding what the customer needs are from each channel, be it phone banking, online or mobile banking, constantly scanning the cyber threat landscape, and then designing solutions which meet those customer needs, but then also protect customers from those cyber threats. When it comes to authentication solutions, we need to evaluate 4 key.
We've lost you there slightly, Tarika. If you wouldn't mind, one more time, that's great. So 4 key areas, yeah?
So the first one being security, the second one being ease of use, the third one being cost effectiveness, and the fourth one being sustainability. When it comes to security, we need to evaluate parameters like, how secure is this authentication solution? Can it be easily spoofed? Can it be reverse engineered? How are we going to store the authentication credentials? What format are we storing them in? How are they encrypted? Is this method vulnerable to, let's say, social engineering fraud, or is it vulnerable to SIM swap fraud? When it comes to ease of use, we test authentication solutions across multiple devices and operating systems, browsers. We test it with different customer demographics. We test it with different customer segments to evaluate how convenient this method is. When it comes to cost effectiveness, we need to consider what's the fixed cost of offering a solution and what's the recurring cost. So what's your cost of issuing card readers, tokens, etc. And then finally, when it comes to sustainability, we need to consider things like how much waste is it adding to the environment. And then authentication solutions which have the right balance of these 4 parameters then become likely candidates for mass use for our digital customers.
Yeah.
Now, when we introduced biometric authentication on our mobile app back in Feb 2015, we spent more than a year evaluating these parameters, doing penetration testing, customer testing, and finally, making sure that the controls, both front end and back end, are robust enough to keep customers safe, but then also the solution is easy to use, is convenient. It's a balance of these 4 parameters is what I would say we need to when it comes to authentication.
Yes, the experience, essentially you want customers to go through and use the service, but of course you don't want them to be blocked too much by the processes that need to be there for security, anti-fraud and all those sorts of things. But I guess, if you look at customer expectations, they have evolved in many ways recently. Do you think that there's been a shift in priorities for banks in terms of offering better experiences? Do you think that customers' expectations are tougher on what we would like to experience?
Absolutely. So I think customer expectations have evolved rapidly, both in terms of convenience, but then also in terms of expectation that they will be kept safe and secure when they use these solutions. So as customers, interact with other digital services outside of banking, they're more used to not using their PINs and passwords anymore, but using their biometrics, their face, voice, fingerprint for accessing the multiple apps on their smartphone, or using their social credentials like their Facebook and Google login credentials to access multiple digital services. When it comes to technology innovation in the authentication space, I think that the solutions have also evolved there. So the solutions have evolved from static methods like PINs and passwords to more dynamic methods like card reader codes, tokens, and now to more advanced methods like biometrics and device trust. And there's obviously challenges associated with all of these methods, as we all know. But I think where the focus has been is while we, increase customer experience on the front end, we make the journey more frictionless on the front end. We invest heavily in digital security and privacy solutions that run in the back end. So it's a combination of three types of solutions, which helps us establish the customer's device profile. What devices does the customer usually use? The customer's behavioral profile, where we evaluate parameters like, what angle does the customer hold the phone at? What's the speed with which they type? What's the pressure with which they swipe? And then finally, understanding the customer's transactional behavior and transactional profile. So bringing these three elements together then offers a robust environment to make the front-end journey more frictionless for customers.
Yeah. I just have to make sure that I don't hold my phone up that way, which I normally hold it that way. These things are very important, but it's a very constructive, it's a very reinforced process, and together these tools are very powerful. And equally with finger, face, retina, voice, that there are many options away from passwords. Perhaps none of them individually are the way to go, but where do you think the interesting developments are in terms of the things like biometrics? Which exciting areas do you think will come through or could come through as options that we can all adopt and increase security, but also increase seamlessness?
Absolutely. So I was asked this question back in October 2014 at the Digital Banking Club debate, whether biometrics are the future of authentication. And we were working on fingerprint authentication at the time, but I obviously couldn't say much. But I can proudly say that we have over 6 million customers using fingerprint or face recognition to log into our mobile apps. And I think there's much more work to be done in this space. So this is just the beginning of a journey. There are multiple different opportunities of introducing biometrics on e-commerce journeys, for example, or using biometrics in the digital authentication space when it comes to digital payments, or even interactions through some of our face-to-face channels like branch banking. In future, we also want to look at how we use biometrics to make the account opening journeys more secure, make the open banking journeys more secure. So I would say there's limitless opportunities in this space, and we're just at the start of the journey with fingerprint, face, and voice.
I suppose in some ways, it's not even necessarily the part of your body that is used as a biometric. Actually, it's the applications of, it's the way that you integrate them together with a particularly relevant solution for customers. Those things will be interesting. I mean, I guess we're not looking at elbow prints, and we're not yet looking at ear prints. But eventually, if those things were relevant, only if they're relevant, you would bring those in. It just has to be you have to evaluate what's really important to customers, don't you?
Well, I couldn't really tell you if we were looking at elbow prints, but all I can say is we are at the start of a journey, and you'll see much more innovation in the biometric authentication space in the coming months and years.
Yeah. What do you think about behavioral biometrics? It came up this morning on our panel. What do you think in terms of the role that it could play? I think the conclusion there was that it was with Peter earlier on. It's a useful additional tool, but it may not be the tool to use.
So security has to be layered. It cannot rely on a single set of controls or a single point of failure. We always look at security as multiple pieces of the jigsaw coming together to then offer a belts and braces approach to keep our customers safe. Yeah. So behavioral biometrics adds a layer of security where we have already established the customer's identity through their authentication credentials, through device profiling. Behavioral biometrics then adds that additional layer of security, which helps us detect things like, is there a remote access tool on the customer's device? Are there any remote access viruses or Trojans on the device that may be accessing the customer's device remotely? Or let's say where there are shared devices where other members of the family use the same iPad or use the same laptop. It helps us establish whether it's the customer or someone within the customer's household accessing their account. So definitely adds an additional layer of security, in addition to the existing controls that I mentioned.
What do you think about the timeline for digital identities in the UK, Tarika? Do you think that there'll be a shift because of open banking or any other issue that we have at the moment in terms of introducing these new identities?
So I think open banking is a great enabler for digital identities in that it's, put the freedom of choice back in the hands of the customer to let them choose how they want to consume their financial information. It's also lowered the barriers for entry for new entrants like fintechs or startups. And that puts, the more traditional banks at greater competition to offer better customer experiences. Plus, what we've seen with COVID is an increase in digital adoption, not just in the UK, but around the world, where more and more customers who traditionally interacted with us through phone banking or branch banking now register for digital banking. We've seen an over 120% increase in customers over the age of 50 signing up for digital banking post-COVID. So I think when you put these elements together, it creates a perfect environment for banks in the UK to now start seriously considering how we offer a digital identity to customers, which they can seamlessly use, not just for banking, but also in other physical interactions or other digital interactions, be it applying for, a driving license, a passport, travel insurance, visas. So I think the opportunities there are limitless. And what you will start to see is in the next 12 to 18 months, there's more investment that happens in this space. And definitely you'll see the competition intensifying.
Authentication is actually surprisingly a very fascinating area. There are so many things in this that are evolving, and the way it could transform the customer experience are many. Do you think this type of digital identity as an authentication, do you think these areas are essentially with fraud in mind, with our traveling way to use our services in mind? Is this the transformation that the banking industry needs right now?
Absolutely. And it couldn't be more relevant than it is in the current environment. If we were to learn anything from the Nordic countries where you have, well-established digital identities, which are used by more than 70% of the residents there, in some cases, almost 90%, like in Finland, UK has that great opportunity where you have over 60 million residents who now carry out a number of their activities online. And, they're obviously vulnerable to the various types of fraud and scams that we see out there. I mean, the UK economy lost over £190 billion to fraud and scams in 2019. So that presents a great opportunity for banks, for the government, for other suppliers in this space to create a unified identity, which the customer can then securely use at various touch points. It could be at the checkout till to establish how old they are, or it could be for travel where, they establish that they've recently gone through a COVID antibody test and they're COVID-free. So there's limitless opportunities waiting to be explored. And I think there couldn't be a better time than there is right now to accelerate investment in this space.
Thank you very much. Well, that was really fascinating. There are so many elements there that I'm sure you can take away. But let's go to audience questions. I want to start off with a remote question from our pundit, Maria Lagotina, who is, I believe, on the line or very close to the line now with her remote question. I would like Maria to, first of all, say who she is, what she does, and where she is. If you're there, Maria, tell us and ask Tarika a question.
Hi, Lindley. Hi, Tarika. So, hi, I'm Maria. I'm dialing in from the Netherlands, from Amsterdam. I've been working in a digital space for the past 16 years. So, Tarika, really interested. So you've been talking about the multitude of methods of digital authentication, and you also mentioned that it should be layered. So probably the question is, how do big or small organizations go about scouting for those authentication mechanisms? And how do you kind of put them on your roadmap, and in what priority order, I'd say?
Thanks, Maria. So I would say the first and most important thing is to understand your customer needs. So let's say for customers on the phone banking channel, and the need is to authenticate the customer through that phone channel and protect them from fraud. then that becomes your criteria for evaluation. The authentication solution should be fit for purpose for the use case. And we go about scouting for solutions based on the customer need, but then meeting the 4 parameters that I mentioned earlier around security, ease of use, cost effectiveness, and sustainability. So it's not about going after the next new shiny solution in the world of authentication. It's about understanding what your customer needs are, understanding the wider threat landscape, and then scouting for potential solutions, which then meet those needs, but then also qualify against those 4 parameters.
Yeah, relevance seems to be very important. Maria, any thoughts from you on that one, Maria?
I don't think there's a silver bullet, and I actually here it's quite a strategy, because like Tarika said, that you should be going after something that is very hype in the market. There's a lot of planning. Was nice to hear that there is an evaluation across the parameters of security, ease of use, sustainability as well, which is now only coming on the agenda for the big incumbent banks. So I don't think it's a heavy research on the market, and also you are always running after the fraudsters, because they are the first ones to create the means to crack your authentication mechanisms.
Yeah. Very good. Well, Maria, we'll see you later on. You'll be with us at the end of the session. If not before. But thanks very much for asking a question direct. That's lovely. Tarika, let's go to some questions from the audience right here. There are quite a few questions coming through, so let's try. I'll pick almost randomly. Hand in the pot. Can you provide an example? Veronica Alaba, thank you very much for writing in. Can you provide an example of how to provide user experience while authenticating the end user? So I think that's what that is rather than just a user experience. We're talking about a great user experience. So I suppose we need to just strip down, again, that early question as to great experience versus authentication. It's a long question. It's a big question. It's right at the heart of it. But how would you approach that?
Thank you, Lindy. So I think the most important thing is robust testing, human-centered design testing, where we test the solution across various different customer segments who have multiple different needs. You test it across devices, across operating systems, and then you identify the challenges associated with that method. So for example, when we were testing fingerprint authentication for our mobile apps, through customer testing, what we identified is the customers had a lot of questions about it, like, what if, my spouse or my child has stored the fingerprint on the operating system? Does it mean they can access my mobile app, my digital banking app? So I think then what we did is, based on that customer feedback and that customer insight, we improved the journey to then display the right notifications, the right warnings to customers, which tell them about making sure that it's their fingerprints on the operating system that are registered, and they delete any other fingerprints which may be present on the operating system. So I think it's very important to test the customer experience first, be it through your human-centered design labs or other user testing methods which are used to make sure that the solution is fit for purpose and that any customer issues are ironed out during that testing phase before it is then rolled out to customers. And I would also recommend pilot testing. So before you go out to your entire customer base, make sure that it's piloted with various different customer segments for a period of time to help you identify any issues that may be present with the solution, which may not come out in a UAT-like environment.
It sounds as though, although you're talking about testing and learning, it sounds as though you are advocating putting quite a lot of effort into that initial phase, so that it's almost ready by the time it gets to customers, rather than taking out a small piece of the product and testing that out as part of something else. Are you an advocate of get this product right, get this interaction right, and then put it out to market?
So there has to be a balance of the two, because you could test a product for years and you will still not be convinced that it's right for the customer. So I think it's about striking the right balance where you do robust customer testing before you introduce the solution in the market. But then you also constantly learn from the customer experience, you learn from the customer feedback, and then keep improving the solution incrementally as you go along.
It's almost time to go. Just a very quick one. What age group, the question says, what age group do you see using digital IDs the most, Tarika?
I would say from what we've seen post-COVID, I would say starting with, customers who are students in their early 20s, straight out of university, getting their first jobs, would be the early adopters of digital identity to start with. But that is not to say it won't be adopted by other age groups or demographics. But I see them as early adopters, followed by, the more subsequent age groups as the ones who follow. So definitely I would say teens, university students, and also, fresh graduates would be the early adopters of digital identity.
So more along Generation Cloud than Generation Y, if you like. Yeah. Okay, well, that's absolutely fantastic. It's been a really insightful conversation, Tarika. Thank you very much for your insights, and also to you at home for your questions, not least Maria, obviously, who we'll meet later on.